Most kids create imaginary friends at a whim, use them for a great many adventures. This is the essence of childhood behavior, an absence of limitations on what's possible. What would happen if the worlds of adults and children collided? What if their imagination met our world of actuality? What would the result be? Miles was young. He'd barely gotten teeth and started shouting random words. Until recently, he'd been captivated by all the wonders of his new world. There was amazement in the chilly air of November, harsh playfulness in the bright summer sun. He enjoyed pulling his father's hair as he was being held. The coarse feeling of dreads between his fingers was strangely exciting. All of that changed when he turned 1. It was a normal birthday party. Loved ones came to see the birthday boy in droves. They showered him with an abundance of festive noises, sweet snacks, and a pointy party hat. The festive cone was secured with a thin nylon strap. But the little boy didn't like all that much. He kept pulling at it, hoping to remove the hat entirely without being corrected by those older than himself. He was passed along from one pair of arms to the next, receiving soft kisses and hugs. That was until he reached the arms of the man with the noisy necklace. This man was taller and a bit bigger than most of the other men in the room. His face carried a more serious tone as well. There were no kisses and hugs, but instead a peculiar present. The man gave him an odd monkey doll, made of soft cotton and buttons. He had a red hat and a matching scarf that gave it a bit of a personal flair that Miles liked. He almost immediately began to chew on it and sling it around in the air. This toy seemed to be perfect for him. Miles would have many toys in his early childhood that would come to take his attention away from this gift. A few years passed and he was walking and talking just like a young boy should. He grew to be a subtly curious boy who loved having adventures around the house and dodging the watchful eyes of his father. One day, he came to a box in the back room labeled Toys. He hadn't quite learned to read yet, so the box didn't give him any extra excitement until he opened it up to find a few of his older toys that had just been waiting to be used again. As he dug through the box, he found an assortment of treasures he had long forgotten about, including that cotton monkey. He saw that it was in good shape, except for a missing eye button. This was no doubt an accident from his teething days. He slung the doll through the air in a playful fashion. He'd found his oldest and most favored friend. Being a bit older, he knew that every good friend needed a name to be called by. He didn't know many, so he settled on one he'd heard before. Lucas was now the name of his cotton-filled friend. He wouldn't go anywhere without it. His father accepted that this was a completely normal thing. One day, Michael, Miles's father, was looking for a kitchen utensil he'd misplaced. There was this sharp knife he'd always kept on the kitchen counter, out of his son's reach, along the back of the wall. He told himself that there was no need to even ask his son about it, because it was completely out of his range. But as more time passed without finding it, he resolved that there was no harm in just asking, just to be safe. He called his son over with a voice devoid of conviction. He found that it was easier to get the entire truth out of his son when he kept things neutral in tone. The young boy came over with innocence plastered all over his face. Did you see where I put that knife from earlier? Miles looked at him with an unflinching face and gave a shrug, saying that he didn't know where it was. Michael took a quick look around the kitchen in disbelief. How could he have misplaced something like that? It was at that moment that he noticed his son doing something strange. The boy picked up his monkey doll close to his ear, almost hugging him. It was as if the doll was telling him something very important. The scene even caused Michael to pause and wait for what was going to happen next. The boy smiled and let out a soft chuckle. He hid the doll behind him and glared in a childish circle around the counter. It was like he'd been directed to search for something. His father couldn't take the mystery anymore. What are you looking for? Miles turned to focus his attention on his father before asking, do we have any more of them? Michael felt like he might not understand the context of his son's question, so he sought clarification. Any more of what? The boy laughed and looked at him with a kind of immature exasperation. Knives, Daddy. I think Lucas likes them. It was with that statement Michael became confused. He was usually pretty good at reading his son's transparent nature, and it wasn't like him to lie either. At any rate, he now knew that Miles had taken the knife. He demanded to know where it was. Miles told him that Lucas was hiding it and wouldn't say where it was hidden. Michael searched the boy's room up and down, but wasn't able to find anything. He'd finally gotten tired of the search and resolved to just banishing the boy to his room. Miles swore that it wasn't him, but in the end he was told to sit in a chair in the middle of the room with the door wide open. A pittance of time had passed before Michael was visited with a general apathy for his son's punishment. He almost forgot that he was sitting in that room, and as he became distracted by his television shows, he was jolted back to reality when he heard his son's bedroom door slam. It was louder than any other door he'd ever heard in his life. He got up and walked down the hall. Open that door, he demanded. There was no compliance, only a soft and foreign chuckle. It sent a chill down his back and caused him to pause halfway down the hall. The bedroom door opened slightly, just enough to let out a bit of light from the windows. Michael immediately had it in his mind to come into the room, scolding his son for his behavior. But just as his hand was to touch the doorknob, that feeling rushed down his spine again, and the door slammed. He thought to himself in a storm of anger that he was going to get to the bottom of what this behavior was, to make sure that it didn't happen again. Michael struggled with the door until finally it showed a little give. It was there, through that small crack in the door, that he saw a figure glaring back at him with the coldest yellow eyes one could imagine. He let out a short scream and let the handle go. He was in shock, unable to explain what he just saw. The door creaked open, inviting him inside. The only thing on the inside of that room was his son, sitting in his chair, smiling, and the monkey doll laying on the ground next to the door. It didn't take Michael long to decide on what to do next. He rushed in and seized the doll, taking it into the kitchen and flinging it into the garbage disposal. Cotton stuffing made a deathly whirling through the blades before eventually being mangled enough to be unrecognizable. After that day, Miles was different. He didn't smile as much and hardly played around the house. He just sat there and watched television with his dad. It seemed like a good change of pace until one day they were sitting at the table eating dinner. Miles was allowed to color after he ate. Today he'd been unusually happy. It was a good change of pace. Michael thought that he might have finally gotten that horrible doll out of his mind. Miles was focusing on the drawing. All Michael could see was a massive black and yellow on the page. He called over to his son. "What are you drawing?" It was almost like he couldn't hear the question beyond his concentration in the picture, so the anxious father asked again, but this time more sternly. Miles looked over at him with a beaming smile and pushed the paper across the table. It showed something resembling a pit or a dark box. On the inside of that pit was a pair of yellow orbs floating in the shade. It was then that he knew exactly what it was his son was drawing. It was in that moment, almost as if cued by some outside force, that Miles began to speak. "I thought he was gone. He just said that he wanted some more knives. But don't worry, he keeps them in your room now, so you don't have to be mad anymore."